Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here.
So many directions we could go off of what you just said. And so I wrote a couple things down just to kind of keep my head straight, but like simplicity, simple or complicated. Alabama, you could say, is simple with what they do. UConn is complicated with what they do. I just wrote, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's simple or if it's complicated. What matters is, does it work? Like, does it achieve an advantage for your players? And you look at the players you have and you figure out what will work for them. It doesn't need to be simple, or can it be complicated? What I struggle with sometimes, because we're very simple. You mentioned, what will my play get on someone's tweet? I can tell you right now, there will never be a Grapevine Faith basketball clip on anyone's social media because it's so simple. But I like that, and I like to teach that way. But I think what I struggle with is when I see or hear coaches trying to do complicated, but it's not the best for their players. It doesn't benefit their players. And you could be stubborn. And you can say, well, just keep teaching them. They'll get it. Okay. Well, how much time do you have? Because you talked about buy-in, and Kenny Boren. Do you know Kenny? Coach for Flower Marcus for a long time. He's the assistant there, defensive guru, Coach Marcus Smart, all this stuff. But, Kenny said the way to create or get buy-in is to win. Like, that's the best way to get buy-in, is to win. So in your attempt or pursuit of complicated, does it work for your players, and are you winning with it? And if not, I would dial it back and I'd go more simple.
But I agree, because I think that you have X number of minutes that you can really have their attention and have things be increasing returns. You get diminishing returns at length of practice after a certain time, depending on the team, depending on the day, depending on which way the wind is blowing. And so the quicker you can get to a understanding level, a mastery level in something, the quicker you can go to build on that or go to the next thing. And if you're just average at a lot of things because you feel like, oh, we're going to get there eventually, well, average loses you games. You got to be really good at something. And even if you're really good, like Alabama, they're so good at teaching their spacing, their actions, and why, that their understanding is good. And so all they're creating, all we're doing as coaches with our offensive side is to get an advantage. That's all you want. And so you can do it a complicated way to disguise, to move the defense, to do this, but all you really want is an advantage, and you can do that simply. You can do it complicated, but you got to get the advantage. And if your guys don't understand how to get it, and then more importantly, how to use it, you can run this really good action that ends in a stagger. But if your guys don't understand how to read and use a stagger, what's the point? And you can have this cool stuff that looks good. And we had a team, a long time ago that Coach Hooten and I talk about. We coached the best that we ever coached. And Coach obviously did an unbelievable job. But we didn't teach that team. And then it's a very player's game. And so we didn't always have the guy on the end that did the thing. And so we had great stuff that if you drew it up and somebody said, this is the scout, like, man, that's a really cool play. But I saw Coach Hooten's growth over time, and I learned a lot from him, but also his growth. Well, let's do something that they can really understand. And I think decision-making is the hardest thing to teach. How do you read rotations? How do you read the tag on a ball screen? How do you read a pin down? Because by the time you guys get to district, by the time we get to conference, whatever it is, every team knows what every other team is doing. And they're going to have a game plan for how to guard every single thing. You have to be able to your guys have to be able to understand, all right, what do we do if this person does this? And then mid-game, when they start doing the opposite, I have to be able to make a reaction to it. And if we're not at that point, then we haven't taught it. If they don't know it, you haven't taught it. And so I think that, a guy like Dan Hurley can do an unbelievable job. He connects his movements to move the defense so very well, but his guys understand what they're looking for out of all of them really well. When they get into a zoom, they know if this guy chases, the trigger man is curling, he's popping. If he's step above, they know, and they all know back cut, pop, action. And so he's taught that really well. I'm not as good a teacher. I couldn't teach those four-sided movements into the action. And so when I watch basketball at night, I'll write down some things, but try to incorporate into what we do, an entry, a zipper entry that we do, a baseline runner entry that we do, a 4-out entry, because it's something that's familiar. And I think that's a word with comfort and familiar were two of the things that struck me when I wasn't doing as good a job coaching. All right, let's put our guys in some familiar setups, some familiar spacing, and then have them be comfortable with what to do out of it. And so in designing our offensive stuff and our plays, I kind of adjusted to, all right, how do we get into a lot of middle ball screens? What are some familiar ways we can get into it? We can pro screen, we can weave, we can zipper. Let's do some different things to get into. We can have 3 different ways to get into this exact same setup so that we can do our part to make it a little complicated for the defense, but not so complicated that our guys don't say, I know what to do here, And that was a hard realization that I'm also still learning how to do that well. But I think, one of the books I'm reading right now by Bob Rotella, How to Think Like a Champion, is one of the chapters is on self-evaluation. And so self-evaluating to not take yourself to a negative place of failure, but you're constantly evaluating everything that you do to make sure you're being the best. And I love that you said that because I think it's constant. Will Weaver is a great friend of mine, and when he's been the head coach for a lot of places professionally, NBA coach. And after every practice he had as a head coach, he would have the assistants send him texts of what went well, what didn't go well, how they think some things could be improved or more efficient. And think of the humility, selflessness that takes to be able to take that every day. And it's not easy because I ask my assistants the same thing. And as humans, our first reaction is to respond and defend, but okay, tell me why you're thinking that. What did you see that maybe I didn't? And that I'm very lucky to have an unbelievable staff. They're great. And they help me in a lot of those things to be like, Coach, this drill was not set up in a way to breed success for the guys. Dang it, you're right. Let's change it up so that they can feel success. Like you said, they need to feel a win. If we're going to do a ball screen coverage, they have to feel a win so that they're going to be fully 100% in to doing that whenever it is. Whether it's a rotation, whether it's a new play or a new spacing, they need to feel a win. And part of that is how we set up a drill. Part of that is how teach how we put personnel in the right place. If we run a play, but we have the wrong shooter in the wrong place, they're not going to feel success. They're going to be like, we don't need to run that play anymore. And so I think there's a lot of the simplicity of setup that is really complicated for us so that it can be really simple for them. And we need to have thought about all of the different wrinkles, all of the different ways people guard it so that we can think for 10 hours so that we can tell them in 10 minutes. And if we can do that, then they can just be comfortable with it. And I think that is a super hard thing to do. And I know that's really coachy to say, and I have not figured that out, but that is my goal of what I'm trying to do is spend all these crazy mad scientist hours. And most of the time I think through things and I'm like, well, that's not going to work because this, but it helps me when they have that question of why don't we do this? I've thought of that. And this is my thought process, but what do you think? Do you disagree as a player? And so it's the ego side. And managing that as the leader of an organization is a tough balance as well. And how do we just make things simple for our guys? How do we make it easy?
I want to go back to, you were talking about whatever action that you choose, creating those advantages. I think this is something, you nailed it, that I see quite a bit, especially with the more complicated a system. I see advantages that are created, but players aren't willing to take them or are waiting for what's next. And so like the way we talk about it is whether your advantage is just you've got a ball in an alley in a corner with a double gap. That's an advantage that you're allowed to take. Well, once you are in it or you take that advantage, the idea is, can I cash in? And if not, can I transfer my advantage to someone else? And then they continue the same process. I think when you teach your players to think like that, they tend to not do what I see a lot is player catches it, an advantage that's been created, but they're not sure whether they should cash in and they're not sure whether to transfer to somebody else. So what happens is they hold it, they wait, and then the team's back to ground zero as if nothing had ever happened. There had been no movement. So I think that whether it's simple or complicated, you nailed it. Players need to know whether they can cash in or they need to transfer, what that looks like, and how to continue to flow throughout that progression. And then with the idea of after practice with your huddles with your assistants, I think you're right on the money. We got to be really careful if our huddles go something like this. Hey guys, what went really well today? And they go around, they tell you, all right, hey, thanks for being here. That's great. Then you take off. Like, no,
Yeah.
Like if anything, guys, hey, where was there a miss today? What are some things that we got to do better, we can do better at? But I think having your players beforehand know that you're going to ask them that at the end, so that throughout practice, they're not just mimicking you or going through, they're actually searching for things and trying to either write down or remember, I'm going to bring this up when we meet after. I think that's huge for a leader.
For sure. It's a love for our staff. I don't want yes men in anywhere in our program because I need to be challenged as much as anyone in terms of ideas, in terms of installation, in terms of concepts. And I want our players to challenge that in the right way as well. Like our communication needs to be in the right place, the right time, the right respect level, just like I would do for them, they can do for me. And so I think that it's a great way to lead, but I also think generationally, it's important that this generation knows why, where before it was how high. That's yeah. And now this generation wants to know, why are we doing it this way? And I don't think that's a negative thing. I think that it gives them some purpose. It gives them some buy-in to know that this is going to be helpful to them and effective for our team because of this.
It makes us better teachers too. Sorry. I think it makes us better teachers as well.
I agree, because then you can tell them that you've thought of the alternatives and why they aren't the best fit.
Yeah, you better know why you're doing what you're doing, because the kids are going to ask, and because I said so, or man, I'm not really sure why. Not a good answer.
And I think those are the moments where they lose a little trust in our competency, when we are unsure, as opposed to we tried something and it wasn't right. If we have a direction that we're going, but we chose the wrong direction and we have some reasoning why we did that, I think that guys understand that they're the same way. If they choose to close out a certain way on somebody, they may make the wrong choice, but they did it with some intention and some direction. And so I think that the more we can talk through, even as you're installing, like as we're talking about our ball screen coverages, we're talking about why we do these things, why the technique of a hand here and a hand here matters, why we don't let them do this. And then even, shot selection. Shot selection, we went through a really in-depth statistical breakdown of shot selection, not why we tell you not to shoot shots, because we don't tell guys not to shoot shots. We try to celebrate the best shots and why our offense is made to create certain shots. And because there's a time and place, like there's mid-range shots that are great shots, in my opinion. There's mid-range shots that are better than getting to the rim because they're uncontested. But you just got to understand the reasoning why and the when to be able to make those decisions. And going back to a couple of things you hit on, the hardest thing to teach our guys and to learn is those 0-second decisions, because you could have dominoes fall, and we use the analogy of dominoes a lot. And if you hold it, you can lose the advantage. There's that space between dominoes, and you no longer have advantage, and then you have to recreate the advantage. And you can't teach that in drills. You can't teach that anything but live. And early, we made a lot of wrong decisions, and that's great because it helped them to be in that situation. There's lots of reps live of they have to learn how to make that 0-second decision. Do I cash in? Is the shot for me? Or is help coming and I need to get the next advantage? And then if we get back to neutral, we've lost the advantage. One of the harder things to get guys to understand is how to flow to get advantage again. What do we flow to? What triggers we do to gain advantage within our offense? Do we go off ball screens? Do we have on ball? Do we go zooms? Do we try to post up? What works for our team in our game plan to reestablish advantage? And that takes a lot of time because that's not set-based. Sets are easier to teach. Say, you go here and you go there. And then it gets scouted and they're like, oh, well, they're fronting or switching out the backside. Like, oh, shoot, what's the play after the play? How do we flow? How do we get an advantage, even though we didn't get it off of our first action? And again, I'm not saying I've taught that very well, but I think that's my goal, is to get guys good at those things so they get good at playing basketball. So no matter what it is we're doing, they're going to be able to make the right read to keep the advantage going. And eventually somebody will get a good shot. Whether it goes in about half the time it won't. And that's okay.
Right.
We're creating those opportunities. But that decision making is hard because it goes against a lot of, as a coach, you want to feel control at times. Whether it's a set, whether it's practice. And one of the things Transforming Basketball talks about a lot is there may be a really ugly part of practice that as a coach, you're like, man, I didn't do a very good, that's ugly. Let's move on. No, that's exactly where you need to be dialing in. And you have 8 minutes scheduled. You need to go 15 because you're right in the ugly growth. And you need to go into that. And like, I didn't get through my practice plan. Like, well, did you get better in this area? Did you get to that place? And we had a drill that I had for 8 the other day and it went for 2 because we've got this down. We don't need that. Let's get on to something that we're growing in. And that part's hard. That's made me try to be a little bit better of a coach as opposed to let's get through this practice plan very efficiently to a place of, did we get out of the drill what we needed? Did we get out of the live action what we were trying to teach? And if not, let's either reorganize in it or scrap this. We got to do it again tomorrow because the way I set it up wasn't great. And it made me a little bit more intent on that as opposed to what the schedule on the card looks like. And that's hard because I'll get caught up in the middle drill. Like, all right, next we need to flow from this efficiently to the next thing. Well, I just missed 30 seconds of this particular drill. Dang it, I got distracted. My bad. And so just putting those guys in those situations as much as possible to learn those things and make decisions. Because even if it's a set, you talk about complicated or simple, whatever it is, they got to make a decision in there. Like you said, you could run a really good stagger and it may have 3 more actions, but you might have a scoring action off the very first one. And you want that guy to know, like, okay, this is where I can make a play and this is why I would make a play. Fran Fraschilla talks about ball screen solutions a lot and does a great job of breaking down why you would do certain things versus certain coverages. And so I think teaching guys against a hard hedge, we do this because of this. And they got to be able to do it on the fly because out of a timeout, a team may start trapping or may start hard hedging or they may start switching. Say, okay, against a switch, we do this because. And just teaching decision-making, I think, is probably what my biggest focus on offense and defense is so that they can be the ones leading what we're doing based off what's happening out there.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.